there's a lot of evidence now that there's a growing tendency for young people and for parents to some extent as well not to accept responsibility when adversity strikes or a bad thing happens. And yet it is a key aspect of the learning process. Now, one of the tools in the Bounce Back program that we particularly liked is something they call the responsibility pie chart. Now, you don't have to, draw this out, but it can be useful to keep this in your mind. If your child comes home and let's say that the teachers said that they tripped someone up in the playground, and they're saying they didn't. But it might be useful to get them to think, what were the circumstances? Was it a wet day? Were there a lot of people around that actually that wouldn't have happened if it were a Tuesday, because on Tuesday something else happens? And actually, when bad events of that kind happen, often it is down to circumstances that are outside people's control. You could have done exactly the same thing on another day and it wouldn't have been an issue. So it can be useful to think, to some extent, was that just bad luck? You then might want to think, how much was it other people were responsible for what happened? And I think it can be a useful thing to do. So, a youngster could say, well, we were told to stand there, or, they were running, that other person was running. These are all legitimate things to consider when thinking about responsibility. But it's always useful to get youngsters to accept some responsibility for what went on, even if it's just 10%. Even if it's just saying, I should have anticipated that that might happen. Because this is how we grow and develop. We accept responsibility for things, and then we can take action in the future. If we deny responsibility, we're then cutting ourselves off from a really important part of the learning process. Another very simple thing that we can do to encourage resilience is when you're reading stories or you're discussing events, tease out from them the adversities. So point out that, this bear is having a really bad day, or that was a terrible thing, but look at the end, it was all right. And you might want to say, what did they do that it meant it was all right in the end? Tease out the learning from this. So reinforce this idea continually that bad things happen, that they are an inevitable part of life. When it comes to the learning process, point out to your children that learning can be frustrating, that it can be challenging, but actually that is also often part of why it's satisfying when you get there in the end, that it's worth persisting because you then get the benefit of the feeling of satisfaction.